news there. I'm joined now from Brussels by the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Pavlo Klimkin. Minister, thanks very much indeed for joining us on BBC World News. And I just want to start, I know you're in Brussels, but if you don't mind, I want to start on Donald Trump. As you know, he said in the build-up to the election that the people of Crimea would rather be part of Russia. And there are concerns within Ukraine that Crimea could be, I think one journalist described it as a wedding present in a new US-Russia marriage. How concerned are you about the United States' commitment to Ukraine and indeed to Crimea?
Look, US commitment to Ukraine is fundamentally important not only for us, but definitely for the United States itself. Because we all understand that we enjoyed bipartisan support from the US in these 2 years after the Maidan. And even the Republican platform actually called peace through strength. And talking to Russia, through strength, not exactly, from the point of dominance, but from the point of strength, is important and will be important not only for Ukraine, for the Ukrainian people, but also for the United States. But I am absolutely sure that with all the level of support, also within the Republican parties, we will have committed effort of support from the United States towards Ukraine.
And one last thing on this, if Donald Trump were to say, look, Moscow, we're not going to make a fuss about Crimea anymore, how would that affect your government's position towards Crimea?
Look, firstly, I don't believe in any kind of deal with Russia at the expense of Ukraine, or better to say, at the expense of Ukrainian people. Secondly, the occupation of Crimea is against the international law. It's against the world how we all understand it. It's a rule-based world. So I can't believe, and I don't believe, in any kind of change in position by the US towards Crimea.
Right. Do you have confidence within the European Union now, as obviously we have a summit taking place in Brussels, to support Ukraine, not least in terms of maintaining, possibly extending sanctions against Russia?
Absolutely. We will have 3 sets of issues on our today's agenda, and I mean EU-Ukraine summit. And it's, of course, about EU solidarity towards Ukraine. And sanctions are important in this context, but it's just one point. The real point behind it is, of course, fundamental solidarity of the whole European Union, or better to say, transatlantic community, towards Ukraine. The second part is, of course, EU-Ukraine agenda, and it's about visa-free for Ukraine. The fundamental message of the European Union embracing Ukraine. It's about energy cooperation, but it's also about EU-committed efforts to support our reforms and what we've been doing now.
But that's important, isn't it? Because it's also about Ukraine's efforts to instill those reforms into society. And there are still concerns that that is not happening at a pace that would be acceptable if you're to start getting things like visa-free travel across the EU. And the appointment of new ministerial positions, a 23-year-old and a 23-year-old anti-corruption head, a 24-year-old deputy interior minister, it's not building confidence at the moment.
Look, if you see what is going on in Ukraine, we actually achieved to implement more reforms in the last 2.5 years than in the whole history of the post-Soviet Ukraine. And in this sense, Maidan was a fundamental game changer, a kind of turning point, leaving the post-Soviet Ukraine. And what we've done also in setting up anti-corruption efforts and the whole anti-corruption structure, having now the electronic system of public procuring, which is the sense of fighting corruption, or to have new police, is fundamentally new. And if we are talking about the whole cabinet of ministers or the reformists in the government, they are, as strong as it was the case after the Maidan.
But you know still that you have, whether it's the IMF or the European Union, saying these anti-corruption measures have got to come faster, they've got to be deeper, and you have voices off like Mikhail Saakashvili saying we need snap elections because the people of Ukraine are simply not buying into your government's commitment to anti-corruption.
Look, I'm the first to say that we have to get better. I would like to follow the example of some of our EU neighbors in the sense of anti-corruption efforts. But what we've done actually last year and this year in the sense of getting and prosecuting people engaged in corruption is already a turning point for Ukraine, and we are committed to go further on that.
Pavlo Klimkin, thank you very much indeed for joining us on BBC World News.
It was a pleasure. Thanks a lot.